Podcast cover art versus episode cover art. Good morning. I'm your host, Favour Obasi Ike, and I am in the marketing club on Clubhouse. As usual, this is where we hang out, this is where we chill, this is where we have a great time, and this is where we learn a lot of things in the process. So, in this process, we're going to talk about something for the next hour, and we're going to shut it down 2 minutes before the top of the hour so we can talk about some things and address what is really needing attention right now, which is visibility. Because sometimes you have a lot of visibility, but you don't really know where that visibility is being seen. So this is where the episode about cover arts, come to play, because you can have a great episode, a great show, a great dashboard. You can have great everything, but if you don't have a great or appealing or even aesthetically pleasant look and feel of your site that should be looking like something that people would want to click on, then that's where we have a problem. And that's where you could have a problem of getting seen. Because if you see a book on the shelf, right, you're going to pick that book on the shelf because of how it looks. You may not buy that book, right? But you're definitely going to see it. You're going to touch it. You're going to feel it. You're going to love it. You're going to be like, ooh, I like this book. I like the texture of this book. The color is speaking to me. It's great, right? Yeah, that's great. But are they going to buy that book? Are they going to learn from that book? Are they even going to think about that book a year from now? That's the question you should be asking yourself about your podcast, because your podcast is like your print. It's your DNA, on the internet. It's literally your voice, right? Your content, your message, your brand, right? Your keywords. Everything that you're talking about is about your experience with your brand and talking to your fans, because these are your people that you're connecting with on a daily basis. So if you're connecting with your people, how do you enlighten their day? If someone clicks on your podcast and they have a color that they see, that color already psychologically creates some type of information that helps them know, okay, this is exactly what we need to do, right? This is exactly where we need to go. So if we are focusing on building tenacity, building awareness, building conversions, building a listenership, like building a place where people can listen to you, you have to be found, you have to be seen, and there are things that you have to do. So there's podcast cover arts, right? And there are episode cover arts, right? They're one and the same thing, but they're also very different, because when you look at them from their layers, you have to look at them from how they're being seen and how they're being pushed out. Now, in the podcast Growth Academy, I'm also going to be telling you about some things. I'll be talking to you about some things that you'll be focusing on and paying attention to based on, specifics, like the number of pixels you need to have for your image size. Because if you have a certain image size that's over the size limit, it's also heavy as far as whether it's megabytes or kilobytes. It also has to be, keyworded. There has to be some type of structure to it. What is a DPI? You have to think about all those things that may sound crazy, but they're very important. Is it a JPEG? Is it a PNG file? Can it be read on a server? Those are questions you have to ask yourself. Can you position yourself and put these things on a position where and over time your value appreciates? Because when someone sees your cover art, they have an idea of, this is what I'm about to listen to, this is the color, this is the vibe. Okay, I'm in. If you're going to McDonald's, right, you're going to go through a lot of yellow, right? If you go to Chick-fil-A this morning, you're going to go through a lot of red. If you go to Popeyes, you're going to go through a lot of orange. You get my point? So the colors you're going to experience are going to help you also kind of figure out what mood you're in. So it has a lot to play with your psychological framework. Color goes a long way when it comes to conversions. And we'll talk about that deeper in the academy. But I wanted to kind of like touch the surface level. So thanks for being here, John. Good morning. Nice to have you here. Ooh, it's doing it again. Hopefully we can hear you. I hear Sky. Also here, Vashan. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Hope you guys are learning something. And if you do have a podcast, please put the name of your podcast in just put the title of your podcast in the chat, because I would love you guys to share your podcast. This is a community. So if you do have a podcast, or if you're starting a podcast, put the name of your podcast in the chat, or put a link so that people can find you, because I want us to connect with each other and just look at each other's artworks. When you think about artwork, it's a work of art, right? So how much work do you put in to build that art? Sometimes it may take you a year to paint that Mona Lisa picture. But sometimes it might take you a minute to just, brush that canvas. So you have to think about what's the time you're putting into that cover art. When people make music, because I'm also in the entertainment business industry too. When people make music, when we make music, when you have an album art, a cover art, a teaser, when it comes to a trailer of a movie, those things matter, because the picture you're giving them is a picture that they're going to remember while they are preparing to anticipate for you. What do you think, John?
I was saying it's a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm just working on an episode for tomorrow. And I do the show cover, which I heard you talking about, but I also do episode artworks for each episode as well. So, love to contribute. Great conversation.
Thanks, John. Thanks for being here, and love the activity. I love that we're on the app and we're also working. That's what I'm always doing when I'm on the app too. So thanks for being here. Vanessa, thanks for being here as well. Good morning. Good to have you here. Hope you're doing well. This is a great topic because podcast cover arts and episode cover arts, they kind of do the same thing, but they also do things very differently. And one example you can notice is if you look at Apple. Not every platform does this, because some platforms you just have the podcast cover art and you never would see the episode cover art. That could happen, potentially, subjectively. But when you look at the holistic vibe and look at where it's being pointed from, especially if you're looking at Apple as one of your major sources of distribution for your podcast, you have to think about even how the cover art plays into the mix. So when you think about the podcast playing into the mix, you have to think about, okay, this is a cover art, this is a color, this is a sound, this is a vibe, and this is where we are taking this to, for the next level. So if you think about the long-term effect of your business and you think about your cover art, you have to think about how it shows up on Apple. And when it shows up on Apple, right, the way it shows up on Apple, on the side, is going to show you on the left side. It's going to show you the title, it's going to show you the timestamp, it's going to show you the date, it's going to show you the description. Then on the right side, you're going to see a little box or a little block that has a little square with another image outside the image of the podcast. So if you look at the differences between the two, you have to also kind of realize that if you use those two for your benefit, it can really help your business grow long term. John, what do you think about that when you're also deciding what to use as a cover for the podcast episode?
Well, here's what I do. So, number one, I have about 15 templates. They're all the same design. They just have different colors or different color combos so that the mind doesn't become numb to them. But it's also a good place to put the title of the episode and use. I try to use photos of things that grab people's attention. The headshots is not one of them, but one of the most valuable things that we don't talk about as podcasters is on our episode artwork. I have three spots for sponsor logos. Upper right hand corner, which is currently being occupied. And then below the images in the body, I have spots for two or three more. But I have two in there, and advertisers, that's part of the plan that they like to get exposure to. Of course, you and show. And then also in the show notes with a link that stays forever. So that's valuable property that you can sell. All right, and then the last two things is with the episode. So I try to use as attention getting photos as possible, book cover photos, all that stuff. But the one thing that a lot of people don't talk about is the value of that real estate. I have places in my episode artwork that I put sponsors' logos, and they're willing to pay for those. The upper right hand corner is, of course, the most important. Then you got below the body, I've got spaces for two, up to three different sponsors. And that's right now I have two, and that's value real estate that they actually are willing to pay for. That's including everything else that goes along with it. There might be some that'll pay just for that, but that's a missed opportunity that a lot of people don't take advantage of.
Ooh, thank you so much, John, for that. Yes, a lot of people don't see that because I think it's based on exposure, really, because not everybody uses Apple Podcasts. Not everyone listens to Apple Podcasts. Some people listen to podcasts on YouTube, so they don't really get that experience. And when you look at the RSS feed being parsed into different, elements, you may not get that same exposure because the API may be different for different podcast feeds. So all these stations have their own commonality, but if you have that episode cover art like John is saying, then that's where you can create those sponsorships and build those awareness pieces. Because anytime someone's listening to an episode cover art, they're looking at the episode cover art, not the podcast cover art. But by default, they could be looking at the podcast cover art. If you don't have an episode cover art, it kind of reminds me of Google alt text, alternative text. When you think about alternative text in its general term, and when Google tells you that we're going to automatically fill in the blank if you don't customize the blank, so it's kind of like the same thing. If you don't do it, then it's by default, placed there. But if you know what you're using and you know how to place that, you can turn that into a space that people can use when they're listening to the episode for 15 minutes and they open up the Apple Podcasts show and then they look at the episode, that picture they see there is real estate. Like John is saying, if someone sees that logo and they say this brand is supported by this and that, someone can take a screenshot of that episode cover art, scan the image, and let Google find out, like use Google Lens or use Pinterest Lens and find some relative things about the brand. Someone can go deeper into search. People are not searching through just text anymore. People are scanning. People are using voice text, speech. So you have to think about all these factors. How can you become the person that someone can listen to, they can see, they can connect with, and ultimately become the person they can work with or even listen to in the first place? So those are some things to look at as well. John, when you look at the episode and the cover art, how how responsive do you see that in the downloads when you do it, and then against when you don't?
I haven't seen a tremendous difference in the episode artwork. The big one obviously is the title, and searchability and discoverability. And then your show notes really is for search engines. When I look at consuming a podcast, I look at the title first and then the episode artwork. And that's how I make my decision. So, how many people do that? I don't have facts on it, but I just know that it's something. If you have the templates ahead of time, it doesn't take long to create.
I believe so too. Yeah, it's something that, it helps a lot. Like for me, what I use my episode cover art for is for highlighting the guests on the show. Because one thing I noticed too is when people see the guests on the show, it also allows them to connect to them even deeper because the only access they have to them is their voice. So if you don't give them the face to the voice or video to the face for the voice, then they may not be able to interact with the brand holistically because not everyone's going to go to their website and check them out. You want to give them that first landing because they showed up on your feed on the place that they hang out. So why not give them the real estate that they deserve because they don't have to leave the platform to understand the same concept.
Yep.
So yeah. So it's like creating that value over time. It just appreciates in consistency, and that brand culture just becomes something that's pretty much innate, over time.
We have someone, I do have someone we can talk to about this, Carrie Brett. She's host of the Shot at Love show. And what a lot of people don't realize about Carrie is she's a world class photographer. And what she was doing is like most of these platforms like Apple and Spotify and other ones, if you don't specify episode artwork, they'll just do your show image. And everything was the same. She took her artwork, her photography of different people, and put her logo on it and replaced episodes and did some slight tweaks to the titles and had tremendous improvement over her download specific episodes. So that's something to keep in mind. We should talk to her about that in the future.
Oh yeah, definitely. If she comes in the room, I'll definitely want to ask her about that. But yeah, Carrie is amazing. With all the stuff that is happening, you think about the photos, the frames, the styles. It really goes deep into the framework. And some people don't really also look at the podcast cover art as real estate. I don't know why, because they think, okay, let's just go to Canva, let's paint something, put a picture here, call it this, and then that's that. No, it won't really scale because now you're not even giving value to the brand name. You know, when people use a brand name, they use it for something, and they're able to build it, you know, consistently. I know for you to also have a brand name that is consistent, you have to think about the number of syllables as well. You know, ideally, this is subjective, but most popular brands or podcasts usually have 2 to 3 syllables. You know, it could be five, six, seven. It could happen. But if you look at the average, like the median size, the range is usually between 2 to 3. You can stretch it to 4, but you know, that 2 to 3 is really where your keywords lie, because if someone's looking for your podcast, they're going to remember it, or you're going to say it within those 2 to 3 syllables. So if you want to keep that brand consistent, growing, then someone has to also think about your brand that same way. So you have to build it into the framework and know that, okay, this is where we're going with this. You know, cover art speaks a lot. You know, I was talking to we have a couple people in the podcast growth academy at the moment. I'm so excited about that. You know, I was like, let's see what's going to happen, because it is the last day for people to sign up to get the one time, and then it's going to turn into subscription. But I'm so excited because I've been doing a lot of questions. I've been asking people a lot of questions. So I'm going to do an episode today on frequently asked questions about the academy. Send it out to my community, you know, through email. So if you want to get that email, please click the link above so that you can have access to that information. Because a lot of people have been asking me questions on what's going to be on the platform, what are you going to do. I've gone deep into the layers of podcasting. Like, I've gone into the binary code. I'm not just talking about cover art and styles and keywords and, you know, voice style. You know, those things are great, they're bubbly. But I've also gone deeper into the layer whereby you have to know, is your podcast 1.0 savvy, or is it 2.0 savvy? In other words, are you meeting the guidelines? Are you also meeting the standards of podcasting? Because when you look at there's something called PSP. I don't want to go too deep into it. It's called Podcast Standards Project. So it's another way of pretty much being compliant with podcasting standards, because when you submit your RSS feed to all these platforms, you have to know that the platform that you're hosting from matters. Because if you're hosting from a bad, you know, RSS feed hosting platform, then you're not going to scale as much. So, but if you're on a popular RSS feed platform where there has, you know, has the high domain authority back to SEO, then you can still have a distribution channel which is able to be recognized by other third party platforms. So I'm going to be going deeper into that, because when you look at also your cover art as well, it's very important to think about your cover art. People don't think about the pixel size. There's actually a specific pixel size range you're supposed to be in for your podcast to not go above the threshold, and also not above the size threshold, because there are two things: there's pixels, and then there's also size. So it has to be a certain size. It also has to be a certain number of pixels, because if you don't achieve those things and you submit your RSS feeds, then you're pretty much getting compressed images. Your episode cover arts are janky. You don't have file names in there. There's no structure. It's PNG today. It's JPG tomorrow. Like, it's so scattered, and you don't want to have a scattered graph to look for data from, because you're gonna start badly on a bad foot. So that's why this podcast academy opens you up to all that information. We have resources to apply, and you can have those one-on-one consultations with me, so we can talk about those things you need for your podcast and really help you grow. Because we don't talk about cover art that much, because people just paste anything on there thinking it's going to grow. So I'm glad that we're here, you know, talking about this too. Good morning, Austin. See you in the chat. Thanks for being here. David, we love to hear from you too. David is an amazing photographer, amazing guy too. So I think, you know, John, it would be nice if David and maybe Carrie get to meet one time, and just discuss, you know, photography, because David does amazing work. David, I'll pass it on to you. What are you thinking about the topic for today? Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Favor. Good morning, everyone in this room. I'm excited to be part of this. Yes, I'd like to connect to with other fellow photographers that are in the same line as I am, and increasing our visibility through podcasts. I think that podcast is a great thing that I could add to also my advertising or my presence, and I'm glad to be part of your course, Favor, and looking forward to learning from you.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you for joining. David is also one of the people in the academy, and I'm so excited about what he's doing, because just in a matter of probably, what is it, 3 months, David, about 3 months or so, the amount of scores he's been seeing on his Google Search Console, his website, it's just been taking off. And, he's been doing business for decades. And now when you're looking at it from the search graph, it's like it's expanding. And now with podcasting, he can take that to a whole new level. Because if you think about what you do as a business, right? I can be a chef and have a podcast. I can be a real estate agent and have a podcast. I could be a gardener and have a podcast. I could be an astronaut and have a podcast. The reason why people don't think a podcast works for them is because they don't know how it works in the first place. Because they think a podcast is just to stick on, post and publish and go. Yeah, I'm on Spotify. Yay, it that's like basic, because you have to go deeper into what I call claiming your account. You have to claim your podcast. We have to talk about that, as well in the academy. How do you claim your accounts? Because when you claim your account, it means you're claiming your intellectual property. Your podcast is your voice, it's your DNA, that's your print. If you record something right now and you look at the waveform, we're all going to have different waveforms. So when you sorry, I had a phone call. When you look at your voice and you look at it, where it's going, how it's going, you have to build into that framework. So when someone sees your account, when they see your content, you have a claimed account, right? You have a claimed podcast profile, and there are ways to claim your profile, right? When you claim that and you have that blue check mark on a server, then it also authenticates your credibility as a voice to be listened to, as an authority in your niche, because you're supplying content that people can see consistently, right? And if you're doing that over time, over time, then you're building that resilience, and a lot of people are going to start listening to you because you keep asking questions to them, you keep giving them rhetorical questions, you keep giving them answers, you keep helping them with information. It can help them grow. A lot of people can start a podcast today and not know where they're going with it, and 2 years down the line they're monetizing it because they had a passion, they had a mission, and they had a vision, right? I started my podcast as a joke. I'll just be honest with you. I started mine as a joke because all I thought about was, I'm a self-taught drummer. I make music, I make jingles, I produce music, I'm a songwriter. I have a music background, entertainment business background. So I've been doing music since I was 6. So I was like, podcast, because with music, it's pitch perfect, beats and bars. You have to be the right tone, you have to master, mix, and everything. Like, it's a whole 9 yards, right? And then you have to go into metadata for, publishing rights, royalties, all this. It's so much going on there, right? That's a whole different world. So I thought about it. I said, you know what? It would be good to get on a podcast, because I've always wanted to have an internet radio show. Back as far back as 2010, I said, I want to have a radio show one day, an internet radio show. And I said, I'm going to go ahead and do this. So fast forward to now, I'm looking at the time that I've been spending on podcasting, and I can look back. And if somebody wants to say, okay, Favor, what have you been doing with your business, with your podcast, with your stuff? I can easily direct you to a link that will take you easily to a podcast show that maybe was recorded as far back as 2020. And you can listen to the information and the conversations we're having then, and then fast forward to now. So if you have a place as a business owner, especially as a business owner today, if you decide and say, okay, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to have a podcast as a vertical, right? It may sound like, oh, I got to buy equipment, I got to buy this, I got to buy that. Don't think about what to purchase, think about what to say and how to say it. And then when you say it correctly and you put it into a recording, then you're able to put it out so people can listen to it, right? Because the color of your podcast, or let me put it this way, the color of your cover art influences the style of the podcast you're going to be giving, right? And it boils down to these things. The font. If you look at the font of your cover art, it's going to say a lot about your show. If you look at the color of your cover art, it's going to say a lot about your show. If you look at the theme, it's going to say a lot about your show. And if you look at the style, it's going to go a lot about your show. Now, the theme part, someone will be like, what does that mean with a theme, right? A theme could be, if you have a podcast, right? And your podcast is talking about how to make the best steak, right? Or you go to different restaurants talking about how they make their steak, right? I'm just giving you a random example right now. And I have a podcast talking about it. I'm going to every restaurant within a 20-mile radius talking about how they do their steak for customers, right? And you know how they make it, talking to chefs, right? I'm giving you guys this is, I don't know if this exists, but I love giving like very hypothetical examples with analogies so you can paint your picture while I paint my picture for you. So if you think about a podcast like that and someone is going around, you know, talking about steak and having that, now the theme of that podcast could be talking about, you know, different styles of, you know, cooking. How do you cook your steak? You know, what kind of seasonings do you have on them? So that can create a whole series on its own, right? Now the theme of that podcast is going to be centered around seasoning. It's going to be centered around, you know, style. How do people cook it? You know, what products do they use? You know, what pans and pots do they use? Those kind of things. That's what they're going to be talking about. So that's the theme. It's not necessarily, oh, how do we serve clients, or how do we, you know, show up on the media, or how many reviews do we have? It goes right into the kitchen's corner, right? That's a podcast segment on its own. Now, the color and the font of that, I'm already seeing like white, because, you know, chefs wear white all the time. So you can think about white, you know, as a podcast cover art. Then maybe you can use a splash of, you know, seasonings around like green, you know, red, just orange, just make it look colorful, right? Because when you look at those cover arts, it's like they're appealing to you. You know, when you look at food and it looks so good that you want to eat it right through your screen, you want that to be the same thing for your podcast cover art. Because if someone can see your podcast cover art, see your beautiful face, they can see your smile, they can see your title, they can see your font, they can see the style that you want to go with, then they know, okay, this is the style of the podcast. It's episodic, or it is roundtable based, or it's content repurposing, or it's interview style, or it's solo style. You decide what kind of style you want for your podcast. But at the end of the day, when you start testing, repeating, processing, then people will start to know about your podcast. And the more you're able to put your RSS feed out to more stations, the better it is. I was talking about this with someone yesterday, and she was like, "That is so true. I didn't come to think of it." And I was like, "I was thinking about the same thing too." And I said this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, John and David, or even you could put it in the chat too. I noticed that, especially from an SEO standpoint, it's very alarming to me. RSS feeds are private, but XML files or XML feeds are public. You have to authenticate your RSS feed to have ownership of that RSS feed. It's like a car and a title, right? If you're the owner of the car, you have a title deed, right? If you're the owner of the house, you have the title deed to the house, right? Your name is on it. Same thing with your podcast. Same thing with the RSS feed. XML file, it's a sitemap, right? It's an expandable markup language, so everybody can see it, right? It's open data, it's open source, but it's not private in the sense of you authenticating that, because you're already authenticating from a DNS record server that goes to Google Search Console, which is still public and it's free, right? So when you look at RSS feeds and XML files being private and public, it says a lot about your intellectual property and how you can scale your business and actually own your brand as a business. What are your thoughts, John, on this?
Well, you covered a couple points. Number one is I'm a big believer in make sure your show is on as many directories as possible. And anything that increases discoverability, potential discoverability, is a plus for you. We get into which ones search and how they search. That's a different thing. That's a little bit beyond my pay grade. But having said that, anywhere, and maybe this will clarify a little bit. People that just rely, I use Omni Studio. Let's say you use Libsyn or you use Buzzsprout or whatever it might be. They're going to create a website for you with their name. All right. That's going to increase their domain authority. That's not going to do squat for you. The Google will index and spider your latest entries based on your title, the first paragraph of your show notes, all that stuff, which can lead to more traffic. If you do the same thing with a website like Podpage or some other place, you increase the amount of places that Google, for example, will search and index your show. You can use different titles. You can tweak your show notes. You can do A/B testing. It's all about increasing discoverability. So yeah, as far as public or private goes, I don't know the answer to that, how it impacts us, but um, I know that my episodes show up. I have claimed mine. So I don't know the ins and outs of that, but certainly it's for me. It's all about discoverability. That's 95% of the game.
I love that, John. You're right, because once you have your RSS feeds in the main directories, then it makes sense. Just like back in the day, when you used to be on the big newspapers or on yellow pages or be on the wall on the street that, has a lot of foot traffic, using guerrilla marketing, for example, you can look at it from that perspective and see that the more foot traffic I get from this one street, the higher my conversion value could potentially be because I have more visibility and have a higher number of impression count. So when you're in those feeds, then those feeds are feeding into those services, into those servers, and you that has an RSS feed is creating links within that RSS feed. I can't go to somebody's podcast and get the RSS feed. I can maybe find it, but I can't do anything with it because if I want to access anything, they're gonna say, "Hey, do you have the right email address?" Or they'll say, "Confirm your email address with this." When you're claiming your podcast, you're claiming it with your email. Then that's why I tell people when you start a podcast, in this academy, when you're starting a podcast, start off with your work email. Sign up for your podcast with your business email. What you used to send as a business, use that email to sign up because that's the same email you could also use to add to your RSS feed. You can use, of course, you can use another email address if you want to. That's on you. But if I'm looking at structure, if I want to sell my business one day, let's say I want to sell this company one day, or I want to merge, or I want to invest, or I want to do something with it, and I have a structure, then I know that if I'm handing over transfer and ownership, I have nothing to do with it because my business has its own entity and my personal entity is completely different. So when you're looking at a podcast, don't look at it as a hobby, look at it as a business. I started off as a hobby, like I said earlier, right? But it turned into a business real quick because I realized I'm speaking so much, I'm saying so much, and a lot of people are listening and they're paying attention and they're taking action, right? So that's value you're adding to their lives. So if you're adding value to their lives, why can't you add value to yours too, right? You can't give what you don't have. So if you're able to create those opportunities, then why not build that interface for them? Because if I'm the only one that has a podcast, great, then what? But if I have a podcast and that podcast gives birth to another podcast and like that, like that, like that, it grows, right? Just like with music, when you look at independent artists, when you look at labels, when you look at people that, they pick an artist, they say, okay, this artist is a new artist in our team. And then that artist grows, and that artist becomes a big shot, and then that artist finds another artist. So you become, it's a whole ecosystem of connections because every podcast is unique. So if you have an RSS feed that's unique to your brand, and you're going to get an RSS feed from the hosting domain that you have. Like John, is Omni Studio. For me, it's Anchor.fm. Even if they're called Spotify for podcasters, the domain is still active. Anchor.fm is the distributor, right? Because if you go into the root directory file, you will see that in fine print. That it's still there active and it's still being modified as a, what do they call it? A certificate, a transparent certificate. So that is where you have to think about your cover art because if your cover art is bigger, right, or your episode cover art is bigger than the recommended size, right, or the range, then that could hurt your website. That could hurt your podcast from reaching. It sounds like, huh? How is that even possible? No, it makes a lot of sense because if I look at the root of your RSS feed. I can actually validate your RSS feed. I can't adjust it. I can modify it because I don't own it, but I can audit it. I can see what's wrong with your RSS feed because I can validate it. There are two platforms you can be able to do that with. So if you are creating content and you're compliant, and you have a good feed, you're putting out those episodes. Those episodes have titles, right? People just, upload an episode with an image. They don't look at the pixels. They don't look at the file size. They don't look at anything. They just upload and go. It may not hurt you right now because you're not really seeing the effect. But in a year or two, if let's say the algorithm changes or you're not compliant, you're not, following the standard guidelines, and then let's say the algorithm decides to prioritize one of the updates and focuses on one element that's gonna, have an effect on your business and you didn't follow through with that, then you're gonna get dinged for that. So that's why we're talking about this cover arts, not because I'm telling you how to create your cover art, That is your creation. That is your baby. That is your sound. That is your brand. That's you. I can't manipulate or say anything that's going to alter what you can do because you have your final decision to make for yourself. But where we come in here is how do you make sure that you're ready to show up on the RSS feed, to show up on podcast directories that people can find you. If someone searches for your podcast name today, can they find you on that feed? Even if you have never heard of that website before and you put in your podcast, can you find your episode there? Can you find your podcast there? If the answer is no, then there's a lot of work to do because your RSS feed is like a stream, right? Think about a stream. You know, RSS stands for really simple syndicating. Even the way it sounds is really simple. And then I think there's another format that says about rich, something to do with rich text formatting. But syndication is the point here. You know, when you think about syndicating episodes, syndicating shows, you know, think about TV shows. When you hear the word syndication, what does that mean? If I've worked in media, you know, media, radio, TV. So when I hear those words, I'm familiar with them, right? So if you think about the long-term effect of your podcast, it's going to be affected by the cover art. Because if someone sees that cover art and they love it and they see the title, and they understand it. They can read it. The size is great. You know, the file format is great. Everything is expandable. You've even put your keyword into the file name that you upload to the server. That adds your root directory as a domain hit for your domain authority. Then that ultimately is going to grow your business long term. So you have to think about your business as a business and not thinking of your business as a way to just make money, quote unquote, right? You think about it as an expansive way to help others because how you are indirectly or even directly affects how you position yourself out there when people see you. Because if you put yourself out there and connect the dots, at some point it's going to click that, oh, yeah, we need to make some changes here. We need to do some things here, right? I was looking at something on LinkedIn, right? Because I'm heavy on LinkedIn. I went to LinkedIn today and I saw this post. I just want to tell you guys about it real quickly. I saw this post and it really said a lot and I had to like kind of do a math, I won't call it a math rap, but I had to like say something about it. Someone said that his first client paid him $200 for setting up his email marketing systems, right? And his work made him an extra $15,000 in 3 months. And that's how he learned that he should be charging way more the end. Now, I came up there and then I just made a comment. And because this is like, you know, email marketing tips for people. And I love following that. You guys should check it out on LinkedIn. They're called Email Marketing Tips. Amazing community, right? They just hit 40,000 followers. I was checking them out. They're on 39,000 yesterday. Now they're on 40.3K today. This is what I wrote on top of that. Know your worth. When the math doesn't add up, multiply your efforts to divide your time in half for tasks that you can subcontract or submit in record time. If you can do the math and have that equation, that formula, then you'd be way way above and beyond, you know, the roof. John, passing it to you.
I'm just agreeing with you on the know your worth because that's a common question. When one of the first questions people get is once they want to monetize, and sadly, too many people focus on the CPM deals that their podcast hosting company provides. And CPM in this case, it stands for cost per mil or cost per thousand, but I equate it as saying costing podcasters money. So a lot of people don't know their worth. They need to. What I always say is this: um, realize with baked in ads, the value of that ad to the advertiser is going to grow tremendously. I still have advertisers getting exposure, and they haven't paid me in 2, 3 years from episodes 3 years ago. They're being listened to. So here's the easiest way to figure your worth. Set a value per hour. Let's use $50 per hour as an example. If it's going to take you 4 hours to uh, insert the ad, do all the artwork, whatever it might be, that's $200. Now double that and say that is what your monthly rate is, because then you have room for negotiating, and you're not cutting into your profitability. So if you say my rate's $400 a month, and we do 8 episodes a month, and you'll get coverage for each one. And right now we're estimating 100 downloads per episode. You can break it down and do the simple math. This is how much it's going to cost you. By the way, this is how many people have my social media. They'll be exposed to your product. Build the value. And they say, well, I'd love to, but that's too high. Then the next question would be very simple. And this is where you ask the question and then you shut up. You say, okay, if $400 a month is too much for you, what is going to fit your budget needs? Then do not respond. If they say 350, you say deal. You get it done. That's how you build value.
I love that. You have to, it's a math. You got to do the math and understand like your time. You can't put a stamp or a currency, value on your time because you can't measure time. We can't measure time. We know we have 24 hours. We can measure that, quote unquote, but we can't really measure time, the word time, the value time we have. When people say time is money, it's always comparative. Time is money, time is not money. Money is time, money isn't money. Time is time. Whatever it is, at the end of the day, you know how much time you have. You may not know, but the time you currently have is what you have at the present time we are in. That's why they say present time. It's a gift now, right? Presently. So if you can create content, like John was saying, and you put it in there, let people see it, it will grow. And when I even look at my episodes that are ranking the top, like my top episode right now that's ranking out of all the 366 episodes, the number one is ranking, it was published September 1st, 2021, and we're in April 30th, 2024. And most of the ones I see in the top 10 from what I see on my list are 2019 episodes, 2020 episodes, 2021 episodes, and 2022 episodes. I don't even have 2023 episodes in my top 10, and we're in 2024. So by 2025, I'm going to be having episodes ranking from 2023 that are going up. So what you're kind of seeing here is like a 2-year cycle, a 24-month cycle. So if you're talking about a topic that year over year, summer over summer, quarter over quarter, season after season, you're going to be hearing the same thing. Like we all know Black Friday is going to be coming. We all know Christmas is going to be here. We all know July 4th is going to be around the corner. We all know that, we all know the holidays, right? We know what's coming. So if you know what's coming and you know what people are searching for based on trends and topics, then those trends allow you to now talk about those topics at a faster rate. Even with SEO with Google, people think, oh, with Google, with SEO, we have to now write articles and put out content that rank, quote unquote. Things are changing, y'all. Things are changing. I'm going to talk about how things are changing for Google because there's some things have been talked about between yesterday and today about Google changing the way search is going to be going. So we're not going to SEO is not going to be the same as it used to be. So I'll be bringing that up so that you guys can hear this. But why I'm bringing this up with SEO is if you have a website and you have an episode, you have content, you have value in them, and you're doing content upgrades, like you're going back to old episodes that you recorded that are doing so well, go back and see why are they doing so well. Maybe it's because of the time. Maybe it's because of the questions I asked. Maybe it's because of maybe we had a lot more stories to tell here. Maybe this, maybe that. You can listen to those things and find out that in a 2-year cycle, your business could be growing so fast. Like if you want to apply for a grant or apply for a loan or apply for something, what do they tell you at the banks? They tell you, hey, we just need 2 years of what? Bank statements. We need 2 years of tax returns. We need 2 years of financials. We need 2 years of something, right? 2 years is a 24-month cycle that guarantees consistency. So if you use that same eligibility requirement and use it as an analogy for your business as a podcast owner, host, business, agency, then you can say that in 2 years, I've had X number of episodes. Let's say I do one a week, that's 52 weeks in a year, times two, that's the number of episodes I have per week. Now I can always go back to those episodes because within those trends, based on SEO keyword and findings, I know that in April, we're talking about this. Cinco de Mayo is coming, right? People are going to be planning for that, right? So that's a season. So if you're writing articles and your articles are focusing on those seasons, then you're baking those episodes into those seasons. Think about, guys, I don't know, maybe it's because I make music or I'm into music and I'm scientific with words. When you hear the word seasons and you hear the word seasoning in food, right? If the food has good seasoning, you're gonna taste it's gonna taste good, right? And when different seasons, because different seasons have different tastes, right? It's gonna be cold, it's gonna be hot, it's gonna be windy, it's gonna be rainy. That's a feeling, that's a touch, that's an expression, right? So if you're creating a feeling for your podcast based on moods, then you know that okay, in May we're gonna talk about this. Like for me in March, all I featured on the podcast were all women because it was Women's History Month. So every year, every March, we dedicate the podcast show to all women episodes. Last month, April and March, we did 10, 10 episodes for 10 women. So point is, create your own brand, create your own sound, create your own style, create your own theme, right? Build you into your own cover art. Let people know what you're creating. Because if you're doing this consistently, then eventually people will love to lean more towards what you're saying, and it doesn't feel like you're selling to them because people don't like being sold to. I don't, and I know you don't either. But I know that if I want to buy something, then what's going to come top of mind is who has been marketing the most. And if they've been marketing effectively, then that's psychologically going to have an impact on my decision when I'm making an informative decision for something I want to purchase. So you have to think about all those corners and create that value for yourself. David, I want to come to you about, pictures because, someone can take a picture with an iPhone 15, someone can take a picture with a DSLR and have two completely different impacts. So if somebody is creating, let's say they have a picture that they want to use for promotion, let's say they want to use it for their location, let's say Airbnb, for example, and they want to take a really good picture, what are the elements that you look at? Is it color? Is it angle? Like, a depth of field, rule of thirds? What do you look at that really captivates the eye that positions someone to make a decision about what they're looking at?
Oh, Favor, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak up here. Yes, as far as photography for Airbnb specifically, there is a couple of key things that I look at. One and most important is lighting, right? The second being the composition. But overall, you always have to keep in mind as the commercial photographer, at the end of the day, your commercial photographer is to capture or photograph an image of a room or the home that's inviting, but at the same time, it could sell itself. The photograph could sell itself, you know, and that's at the end of the day, that's the main objective, just to create a photograph that also I like, my taste is very also very clean, not something that has a lot of distractions or stuff like that, and taking the right angle, whether it's the home or commercial building of it, right? And that represents that place the best you can. You can capture it. And again, lighting, composition, all that plays a big part. But at the end of the day, you want to capture a photograph that could sell for itself, and that's what I'm looking for in a photograph. Um, I do wanted to add something along the lines of where you're talking about, images and also SEO, SEO, search engine optimization. One of the things that I do for my Airbnb photography or any type of commercial photography is embed keywords and descriptions in every photographs and also geotag them. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but you can really open up a file on the back end, and this is huge. This is probably one of my, I guess, top things that I do that helps me rank and just bring in even more clients. It's doing that extra work, a few more steps, um, and you can do this. Open up the back end of a file, and like I said, even drop in descriptions, your website, the copyright on there, just filling in all those blank areas will definitely help your image, whether you post it on a website or you post it out there on Google. It helps it rank monthly the photograph, and that is something that that besides doing a page SEO, that is something that people should be looking at as well. As just as important. Video. Same thing. You can do the same thing with any type of content. But I'll leave you with that. I think there's some juice for people that are into photography. Thank you again.
Thank you, David. That was some real good juice over there. And that's a whole new topic in itself. When it comes to geotagging, which is good for SEO, definitely, especially if you have a podcast. And let's say you have a business, your local business, and you're just serving, let's say you're serving 3 counties. Let's just look at that. And you're using your photos, you're connecting with businesses in there, you're telling them, hey, would you like to be on my podcast so we can talk about your business? And then you're putting their cover art when you create it and putting an EXIF tag on it or EXIF data tag on it. An EXIF stands for exchangeable image file. And that's a way of pretty much like looking at the coordinates, the longitudes and the latitudes of positioning, your photo, and literally printing a DNA, like David was saying, of your photo. And let's say you live in LA, for example, and you live in somewhere in LA, and you want to focus on people listening to your podcast in LA. You can literally pinpoint LA into your podcast cover art and then publish it so that people can find your cover art and find your content there. And eventually they can connect with you, right? Because you've put the longitudes and the latitudes in place. And then, of course, it's being baked into the system. So if someone's typing for, business tips, for this city, then you show up there. The more brands you're able to connect with, put them in your show notes. Those links are also going to be consistently put into your branding structure too. So if you have show notes that have external links that to brands that are local, that are also positioned to your area, it's a win-win. There's so many things you can do with that, but all this is information that you can take home. Sometimes you may use it, sometimes you may not. But the beauty about podcasting is once you said it, you said it. So someone can take it, run with it, or they can just sit back and watch, paint dry. So it's really up to you on how you want to position yourself as a business in 2024 and spend less money on ads, because you can spend money on ads. Literally, you can create pulses. $5 a day, $10 a day, $15 a day. That will not really hurt your bank, right? But what's going to give you back is data that you can use to really position yourself. So when you do spend the actual budget for your business, then you're focusing on a specific area. I've talked about zip code marketing before. You've heard it before about paid and owned media and earned media. All those things come together because when you know what your podcast is about and you know who you're serving and how you're showing up to serve them, then it makes a lot of sense on how you can position yourself for the betterment of your business for them to see. So if you have a PSA, right, you can put that on your podcast. If you use different seasons, it can help you too. We won't go too deep into this too, but just to mention it, when you look at Apple, right, and you go to Apple Podcasts and look at someone's podcast, you're going to see two things. You're either going to see, actually, three. You're going to see three things. One, you're going to see either just a running list of episodes. Two, you're going to see a running list of episodes with a trailer section that, has been slotted in by the author or the, podcast distributor, the host. And then third, you can see those two plus the names of the host and the guests, or you can actually have the names of the hosts, with their pictures. Just like on Apple, how you can see those pictures of people you follow, friends who listen to the same music as you. That kind of formatting is also for podcasting too. So when you connect your podcast, put out your show, be very specific with using Apple, because Apple is the biggest directory, right? It's as big as others. There's Listen Notes, there are other great ones too. But if you're able to position yourself and get your cover art with the right file size, with the right, you know, file type, of course, with the right file name, all the filing, when you think about filing, you're filing things in order, in alphabetical formats, in chronological formats, in numerical formats. So if you're also thinking about your business and filing your content in a structure that in an online library or a server, you can get all that information stored and supplied, then you're always going to be gold, because you're always going to give content upgrades, and that's always going to give you the top, of that search. So this has been a great topic about podcasting for your cover art. I didn't tell you about what colors to use, how to use them, but we really talked about the structure and how you can make sure you're not just everywhere and everywhere, but you can be seen and you can actually grow long term. So before we wrap up in the next 3 minutes, I wanted to pass it to you, John, to hear if there's anything you'd like to say. What would be your final thoughts on the topic? How can people can also connect with you as well if they have something that they want to reach out to you for? And then I'll pass it to David as well.
Well, the one thing I would take away from this is people are putting a lot of work and effort into their shows, and you should. And whether it be a business to business show, or your self sponsored, a business consumer show, or a general entertainment show, put as much content and quality into the preparations you can. But don't miss out on opportunities to increase your exposure. Your artwork, your episode artwork can make a big difference. And remember this. Back when I was in my 20s and 30s, so obviously before David's time and Favor's time, there was a thing called glamour shots that were the rage. They're in the malls. Um, Headshots of your guests don't frickin' work. I'll repeat that. Headshots of you and your guests don't work. Get some attention grabbing photos and put them in there. And don't be afraid to repeat the title of your show, and take advantage of that. And remember, it's valuable real estate. The episode artwork is valuable real estate that you can use to generate more revenue for you from advertisers and sponsors. Thank you. And by the way, you can just reach me at Podcast Pros. And here we do rooms Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5 p.m. Or just go to letradio.com, the contact us page. That's my main show website. Or you can always DM me with the Instagram, and I'll send you my email and we'll communicate there.
Thank you so much, John. Appreciate you for that. That was amazing. I'm glad that we learned something new, and thank you for that information. And also, Okpe as well says, great information today. Thanks for being here, David.
Yes, so I can't talk a whole lot about podcasts. I'm just getting started looking into podcasts, and I'm glad again to be in this room, to be learning from all of you guys. John, you shared some amazing information. Favor, you're the man. That's awesome. I but my podcast, what I'm looking into is photography. Just putting out their information on photography and perhaps SEO and stuff like that. But that's really what I want to create and in general what we talked about here. It's not about selling. It's just about mostly giving information, and something that John also talked about. It's not about us. It's about giving back to the public, right? Giving some kind of value back to everyone. So I'm sure I'll be reaching out to you guys for some tips and for more information on this. So wish me luck, guys, and I'll I'll see you when I get this podcast off the ground. And again, thank you, guys. Thank you, Favor.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate you for that. And for you who's listening to us on the replay, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Hope you learned something new and take action on what you've learned. And if you want to connect with me, please click the links in the description as well. If you'd like to join the Podcast Growth Academy, the time is now because we kick off, monthly, yearly, and lifetime, passes from tomorrow. So today's the last day to do that. And if you'd like to, please click the replay, save this, and then click the links above. If you want to schedule a call with me right away to get more information, please do. And the link is available as well as the we don't play podcast.com site that you can listen to all the episodes we have available for you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either me, John, or David for anything you need photo related, podcast related, and we'll be able to help you as well. Pierre, Dr. Shari, Austin, Dr. Keisha, good to see you as well. Bruno, Mohammed, thanks for joining. Welcome to Clubhouse. Good to have you here. It's good to have new people on the app too. So it's your first week on the app. Thank you for being here. Good fella. Thanks for being here. Joy and also Okpe. Thank you for being here. God bless you all. Have an amazing Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your April. And I'm going to see y'all in May.